Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is KarQ, and welcome to my first impressions hero tier list based on my experience in the Overwatch alpha playtest to help you prepare for the beta. No sponsor today, just make sure to come over to my streams at twitch.tv/KarQ during Overwatch 2 and my other channel, the KarKives, where I do more tier lists and gameplay, Kar clips, Spanish, Portuguese channels, Twitter, Insta, TikTok, yada yada yada. There's going to be a significant balance patch before you get your hands on the game on April 26th, so this list is going to be pointless in a few days, but speculation is fun. And looking back at what changed from patch to patch can really contextualize why certain heroes are good or bad. And everybody has different opinions, and establishing the context of each tier list is important, so listen up. This tier list is for the average competitive ranked player, solo queue. This is not the tier list for the pro Overwatch League meta because those guys are executing very specific strategies while playing heroes at the highest skill ceiling. Okay, let's begin. I'm gonna put D.Va in S tier as she's a great versatile hero. She has 3 seconds on Matrix, up from 2 seconds in Overwatch 1, which is a 50% relative increase in its uptime. Back in the early days of Overwatch 1, Matrix used to be 3 seconds in duration, but it was on a 10-second cooldown, and we didn't have micro missiles, along with all the other buffs that came over the years. Overwatch 2 D.Va has an outrageously long Matrix duration, plus the burst damage option in missiles with a quicker booster cooldown, lower move speed penalty while firing, and a little extra HP at 650, making her a jack of all trades. Decent damage, decent mobility, decent damage mitigation, and is just a great choice if you don't know what to pick since she's so versatile with many different playstyles and can fit into many compositions. So again, if you don't know what to play, she's a great option. Pro players may not use her as much since they are a coordinated 5-stack with a strategy in mind, but for solo queue purposes, S tier, great hero. I'm gonna put Doomfist in B tier as he's a good hero and he's playable in the right comp and right map setting. Obviously, he no longer has his uppercut, which was a big part of his movement, but his seismic slam movement buff opened up another set of movement tech, which is quite impressive in its own right. He can really hunt down snipers well with his seismic slam, and he can be run with really fast dive comps, but I'd say his strength lies in fighting in more closed off buildings or maps, and you should opt more of, I don't know, like D.Va or Ball for dive comps if you're out in the open. Doom still feels like an all-in hero with all your cooldowns, and if you don't convert anything meaningful with your cooldown abilities and your combos, you'll have to leave the fight without making much space for your team. The upside is that Doom indirectly got stronger with less CC in the game, like no more flashbang or Brig shield bash. However, the downside is he's just a sitting duck while he's using his power block, and he's incredibly easy to sleep dart, hook, javelin, or he can get hacked. It reminds me a lot of the old Roadhog's take a breather ability from launch where he had to sit still. So he's B tier for those reasons, but he can easily jump to A or S tier if they make his power block immune to CC or something. Orisa is good. Blizzard honestly hit a home run in both making her viable and fun as hell without her barrier, halt, and supercharger. She has distinct weaknesses though, so if you play on high ground, play at range, you can sit back here and farm her on high ground, for example, and she can't do anything. Or sit here at range with a Discord permanently on her and farm her, but if she ever gets up close, she is scary as hell. Her primary fire has unlimited ammo now, but it is a lot weaker. However, if you hit the javelin, that shit really hurts, and it's really good because you can follow up with a couple of guaranteed headshots and pretty much burst a 200 HP hero. She can pull off some sick combos up close, like a javelin up to the wall or a spin push off the map, so I don't know what else to say. She's really good. In terms of tankiness, she has 500 base health now, and then her Fortify, if you pop it, you're even tankier because you're immune to CC, you take damage reduction, and you get all this over health now. And then after you finish your Fortify, you can spin your Javelin to stall, eat all the projectiles up front, and then you can pop your ultimate if you need to, and you get a free Fortify while you use it, so you get that extra overhealth again. And then once all of that ends, your first Fortify cooldown is probably almost ready to go. So if cycled correctly, you're just very hard to kill. And for the average player, you're gonna find her pretty strong and oppressive, so I'm gonna keep her at A tier. Reinhardt was pretty niche. Niche or niche? Anybody who says niche in the comments, leave. I didn't see much Ryan at all because the meta in the alpha was pretty divey and fast-paced. He generally needs a Lucio to be effective, or if you're playing King of the Hill or control maps, that could work with Ryan as well, where you have that central point to defend. But other than that, it's a situational pick and works best if you're in an organized pre-made team or in scrims. If you just blindly force Rein on every map in Overwatch 2, you're gonna feel pretty useless a lot of the times in my opinion. So, C tier. Still playable, but niche. Roadhog is niche at higher rank since he's easily counterable, but he's definitely playable for average players. Roadhog is the king of punishing poor positioning, and if you're an average player, your positioning is unrefined, let's say that. He has 100 more health in Overwatch 2, he's always self-sufficient, and has a relatively simple kit. There weren't a lot of other individual changes, but that new tank roll passive, which reduces ult charge granted by tanks by like 50%, in addition to his current hidden passive that was introduced back in August of 2021, that reduces ult charge granted by 25%, makes him less of an ult battery than you would expect. But it's unconfirmed, but if it is additive, that means he has a 75% ult charge reduction. Not sure if it is, but until that's confirmed, he's still a solid B tier in my eyes. There weren't many significant changes to Sigma, except that he got a huge HP buff in the alpha. He was at 550 health, so that's like plus 150. But his gameplay core itself, his gameplay mechanic, hasn't changed very much. Sigma is still kind of a hybrid main tank slash off tank, so he can hold down the front line and be an anchor if needed, or he could go on off angles. And his solo potential and sustained poke damage give him the ability to take a lot of 1v1s as well, and pressure the enemy on an objective. So he's kind of an all-around decent hero, so, you know, he's B tier. He's playable. Winston definitely lost a step coming into Overwatch 2. His new secondary, the railgun type fire, is good for poking and building primal, but it's a lot harder to build his ult now because everyone is so spread out. In Overwatch 1, Winston relied a lot on his off tank to support him as he dove in and out, whether that was a D.Va Matrix or a Zarya bubble, but now he's on his own. So if you have a bad initial leap or mistime your bubble, you're probably cooked. There are situations where you could play for farming nano with your Ana to help build primal faster, but I would say that playstyle is a bit outdated since support ult charge takes forever to build up. So it's no longer really practical. So for that reason, Winston goes into the C tier, but I hope he gets some changes before the beta. For Ball, I actually thought he was pretty strong and playable. He kind of stayed the same as Overwatch 1 because in Overwatch 1 at the high levels, he's always been pesky, self-sufficient, and was the most popular tank in Grandmaster and above, actually, if you didn't know. But I think because people are a little bit more spread out in Overwatch 2, he's a little harder to play, but you can definitely still 1v1 people, and you have that tankiness with adaptive shield, obviously the high mobility, and you can dive with your Sombra and Tracer. Now, despite losing some big counters with the removal of Flashbang and Shield Bash, the introduction of Orisa's Javelin is annoying, and the new Sombra can permanently mark you with the hack, so you're walking around with that 40% damage debuff and the entire enemy team can see you, because remember, if you're hacked, enemy team, it's like a sonar. You're just red for everybody. It kind of removes that element of surprise if Sombra is on the enemy team, so B tier. Zarya has always been a feast or famine hero, and that's still true in Overwatch 2. Her new double bubbles allow you to either soak up a lot of damage on the front line or support your DPS's engagements. But either way, her double bubbles let her stay at a higher average charge. But outside of her bubbles, she doesn't have a lot of utility and she might struggle to find consistent value. But a high energy Zarya is always strong, so for that reason, B tier. Ashe is playable. There's not much to say because I don't think they changed her very much, if at all. She's good against slower comps because if you can stay on the high ground, you can get consistent damage on the enemy team without getting jumped on. It's a little harder to get value from her dynamite because teams don't clump up together as much, but other than that, there's not much else to say. B tier. I actually thought Bastion was really good in the first alpha build, but after a few nerfs that we saw while we were playtesting, the last version of him that I played bumped him down a few tiers to niche. His hitbox is ginormous, which is not good for a DPS. And on top of that, he can't self-heal anymore, so he relies a lot on his added mobility to survive and deal consistent damage. Also, that mobility button doesn't last forever, by the way. It's on a timer, and he feels kind of meh when he's not in that turret form, so he's super situational, and it depends on if you can use your mobility effectively or if you can rocket jump to get onto off angles, so C tier. Cassidy is surprisingly decent without his flashbang now. His new ability is kind of like a sticky grenade, and if you can land that into body shots, you can take out a squishy hero pretty easily. He's lost his peeler playstyle where you sit back and protect your supports with that flashbang stun, and he's kind of evolved into a duelist. You get in there and you duel people, deal damage, and he's one of the few DPS heroes that still has that thick bonus health of 225. Overall, just a playable hit scan and belongs in B tier. Echo is playable, kind of between strong and playable. They definitely nerfed her ultimate where duplicating now caps your HP at 300, which means you shouldn't necessarily clone tanks anymore as a first priority, especially after they gave tanks all this extra HP in Overwatch 2. However, it still takes long as hell to build ults anyways, so my tier list is largely based on who's strong outside of their ultimates, and Echo is very good outside of her ultimate when pocketed because of the no fall off damage with their primary fire, sticky bombs, and that execution beam. So, B tier, playable. Genji took a fat L in the Overwatch 2 alpha because one of his strong playstyles in Overwatch 1 was building quick blades. Now, normally, you'd farm it off tanks, but because there's one less tank, and the only remaining tank now grants 50% less ult charge due to that roll passive, there's gonna be a lot more AKM blades. Outside of his ult, Genji is very mid, as the kids call it, or average. Why choose Genji as your dive DPS option when you have like Sombra or Tracer? So for now, I have him on D tier, but with that being said, I've heard through the grapevine that since my time during the alpha playtest and the feedback we all gave, they actually buffed Genji, giving him 2 stored dashes allegedly, which significantly does make him much more viable and is probably the reason why some other people's tier lists that I've seen over the past 2 days rate Genji much higher. Hanzo is playable, and he kind of feels nice to play. He got a small nerf to his storm arrow damage if I remember correctly, but he feels exactly the same as he did in Overwatch 1 and still finds value as long as you can hit your shots. Just don't miss. Junkrat has always depended on funneling the enemy team into chokes and spamming them with his nades and concussion mine, and then farming the enemy tanks to build his riptire. Obviously, if you're in his face, he can still one-shot burst you down, but with that new tank roll passive, it takes pretty long to build Riptire, which means you have to look for very specific situations and certain parts of maps to play him, so I'll put him at C tier. I only played 1 game of Mei, so you have to take my opinion here with a grain of salt. Her primary fire got reworked to do a lot more damage now, but it doesn't freeze people anymore. But having that multi-targeted AoE attack that does 100 damage per second. That's right. It used to be 55, I believe, with the freeze in Overwatch 1, but it's 100 DPS now, which is the equivalent of, I think, the Zarya beam at roughly 35% charge or something like that. But in any case, it's AoE, and they also get slowed, so you can actually like get a lot of the beam on them, and it's really potent if you can get up close. However, by nature, she's a close range hero, like I said, with her biggest asset in that wall, plus that new primary fire now. And she's kind of mediocre at long range with her little projectile icicle poke, and doesn't necessarily have a gap closer to get close, so she really only works on certain maps, which puts her in the C tier, niche. Pharah has always been playable if you can keep your distance from the enemy team and land your rockets. As long as you play past the damage fall-off range of a lot of the hit scan heroes, or get real sneaky with the good flight paths and having a good mercy pocket, you Pharah mains can probably rest easy in B tier. Reaper's playable in B tier and has his strengths but very distinct weaknesses. He has such short range and you need to get into your enemy's face to deal significant damage, but with his lifesteal, Wraith, an escape ability, Shadow Step, and the reduced amount of CC from the DPSs and supports, he has a much easier time hunting the backline. He's also decent at fighting off their solo tank as well, especially Doomfist. The only support that can hard CC him right now is Ana with her Sleep Dart, and 2 of his main counters, which was Cassidy's Flashbang and Brig's Shield Bash, obviously don't stun anymore, which allows a lot more free Death Blossoms if you play your cards right. Overall, he's decent and in B tier. Arguably an A or S tier in the pro Overwatch League meta, but that's a tier list for another day. Sojourn was incredibly strong at the beginning of the Overwatch 2 alpha. Over time though, her disruptor shot got nerfed and her numbers got tuned down a bit, but she's still really mobile with that Apex Legends running slide, has a nice slow field with that AoE damage, and her railgun is where it's at. It's projectile for her primary fire to build up the railgun, but then the right click or the secondary fire, the railgun sniper shot, is a hit scan shot. And it builds quite easily because you could farm it off like a Zarya bubble or like a Rein shield and stuff. And you couple that with her ultimate, which charges pretty decently fast, and it gives you that handful of fully charged railgun shots, you can really light up the scoreboard. Unfortunately, because of those slight nerfs, she falls just outside of S tier and is a solid A tier hero at this point, as long as you can hit your shots. Overwatch 2 is a much more skirmishy, scrappy FPS game than Overwatch 1, and that environment makes Soldier a lot stronger. His high mobility with sprint and rocket jumps and that self-sustain with that healing pad are really important tools and really powerful when the meta revolves around positioning on the high ground and flanking the backline. Having only one enemy tank also means you're going to spend less time breaking shield and more time doing non-stop pressure and poke damage. He's a strong choice as we move towards a more deathmatchy playstate, so A tier it is. It feels like Overwatch 2 relies a lot more on individual skill and mastering timing, which is something you'll have a big impact on if you can be good with Sombra. She has had a lot of stylistic changes, such as the overhaul of her hack, which now silences the enemy for 1 second, and for 8 seconds they take that 40% extra damage and can be seen through walls. Hacks on health packs only last half as long at 30 seconds, and you get put on a 4-second cooldown if you take damage while trying to hack someone. But now you can hack while in stealth, and that's a big change. And you can still cancel ultimates and abilities to interrupt your enemies. Sombra's EMP also got a massive change. Now it deals 40% of the target's current health and hacks them. This combination of the hack and EMP makes the enemy team so squishy, so it's a lot easier to use it to assassinate enemy supports even faster. All of this, as well as a tightened bullet spread, makes Sombra a really strong A tier hero. Plus, the new ping system buffs Sombra a lot, so you can actually stay invisible and you can ping enemies wherever they are as you follow them around, and it gives your team the advantage of always anticipating their positioning and what they're about to do. Don't underestimate that. Symmetra definitely takes an L going into the Overwatch 2 era. She thrived in the Overwatch 1 double shield meta, but now that there's only one tank and she can't stand behind her shield and build up her primary fire off the enemy shield, she only works in very specific defensive setups. I honestly did not see a lot of her in the alpha testing, and for good reason. She sits in the C tier because she's not useless, but she's definitely not good and very, very niche. Torb suffers the same problem as Symmetra, where he's strong when the game is slow and everybody is grouped up together. The current Overwatch 2 meta is really fast-paced, and while his turret can be useful to deter flankers for a bit, if they destroy it before engaging, he's kinda useless-ish. Like, it's just hard to reliably hit his Cheetos on fast-moving targets across the map. And a lot of the new maps are really wide open, I find, which makes his Molten Core a lot weaker by nature. So, sorry Torb mains, he's gonna go in C tier for me. Tracer has always been a strong hero to play no matter what. So overall, Overwatch 2 is a mobility meta, and Tracer obviously has a lot of mobility with her blinks and recall, and she still has a strong one-clip potential like she's always had. Tracer is especially strong if you can combo her with an unstealthing Sombra on your team, for example, so the two of you can delete enemy supports. Unless they nerf her, I see her staying as A or even S tier. Widow finally has 200 HP again, so she won't die to a sneeze anymore. She's pretty good on wide open maps again, without a bunch of corners and hallways to block her long sight lines. And she can survive a little longer now that there's only one tank diving her instead of two. Plus, the sound changes they made to her gun make her feel so much better. There's something about the sound that just makes it easier to hit shots. I can't explain it. With the game being 5v5 now, getting one pick with Widow is going to add so much more value to your team, so there's potential for huge impact with the well-timed headshot. She goes in the B tier because if you're in a tight space or whatever, you do get kind of dove on and kind of useless, but overall she is playable, for sure. As a ladder ranked only support player for the last 6 years, I thought Ana was great. You have to adjust to be a lot more solo carry and not as a heal bot, and you can really change the tide of the fight if you do it right. And I've always had no problem switching to a DPS oriented style, but I know a lot of newer or average Ana players don't know how to make that switch, so that's an adjustment you're gonna have to make to find success on her. The support passive, where you get that self heal of 10 HP per second after not taking damage for 2 seconds, can really help you to not have to nade yourself in between fights, which means you can use it a lot more offensively to secure those sweet anti-heals to focus down a target. Ana also has no damage drop off, remember? That sniper. So if you can hit your shots, you're gonna be able to 3-tap an enemy squishy no matter how far away they are, or even combo it with a nade if you need to. Her sleep dart cooldown did get nerfed, but she's still one of the only few heroes with a true hard CC, which inherently makes her pretty strong. I'm totally being unbiased here when I say Ana goes into A tier. The immortality field, still broken. But Baptiste did take a step back in Overwatch 2. A huge part of his kit was strong AoE healing with his healing grenades and regen burst, but with all the flanks and less grouping up, it takes a lot longer to build window and shift the tempo of a team fight. Fewer tanks and fewer people to heal and less all charge puts Baptiste down to B tier. Still playable, still pretty good, but just not as strong as he once was. All things considered, Brig is still a pretty decent hero. Now, she does a lot of damage and has the potential to one-shot combo a Tracer again like she did on launch. Despite losing her stun on the bash, you'll find out that Brig still has a lot of survivability and support, especially on like payload maps where you can stack her Inspire healing passive with the payload healing to keep your team alive. I'd put Brig in B tier for now, but she might have stronger potential with the added mobility to her shield bash once players kind of get used to it and evolve her playstyle a little bit. I can see her rising up pretty soon. Reddit Lucios rejoice, because if you have good wall riding mechanics, you're gonna have a great time. Good survivability is key in Overwatch 2, especially as a support hero, and Lucio is both fast and can keep himself alive with the healing aura, meaning you can really just solo backlines now. Now, if you can't wall ride, it might be a little harder, but he's still a decent pick if you have good mechanics. I put him in B for now with the potential for A if you can DSP stanky your way around the map. Mercy is serviceable in the right situations because you can't really go battle Mercy as much as you would like with how strong DPSs are right now. I would say she's a niche pick and better with flying heroes like Echo and Pharah rather than a sniper like Ashe. Because if you're pocketing a sniper, it's still really easy to dive on you because there's just less peel in the game. But if you're flying around and have that aerial guardian angel option, it is a lot easier to get out of danger. Mercy can't fight off enemies like the other supports, so you really have to rely on your mobility to make her work. And Prey, you're also pocketing a serviceable or good DPS, so she's situational. Overwatch 2 belongs to Moira. DPS Moiras. Moira is good, like she has the survivability to get away from danger and the damage and sustain to win 1v1s against a lot of the flankers. She can even go on her own on flanks, and her fade gives her so much mobility as well as invulnerability. If you take a bit of damage on your way to a flank, you don't have to burn a heal orb to heal yourself back up. Just let the passive kick in. You don't have to waste time going for health packs. It's really that easy. Even without her ultimate, Coalescence still is a little slow to build. She's kind of nasty for the reasons I listed before, so Moira goes straight to the A tier. Zen has always been a double-edged sword, and that's true in Overwatch 2 as well. While he's certainly not as bad as Mercy, he is dead meat if you leave him alone with how many dive heroes there are. But if you're able to survive against a slower enemy comp, you can dish out a lot of damage and still frag out. In higher elos where they have the reaction time to fight off a dive and probably pair the Zen with a proper other support like Brig maybe, he's probably a little bit higher up into A tier, but for now he belongs in B tier for most average players. That's just the way it goes. And there you have it, my Overwatch 2 first impressions on the alpha patch tier list for scrubs like you. Are you a scrub? Are you average? You came to the right place and you watched the right video. Thank you for watching. I'll make another tier list as soon as I get my hands on the beta and see what else changed with the balance patch. But until then, subscribe here for non-stop Overwatch 2 content along with my other channels on the KarArchives, KarClips, twitch.tv/KarQ for live streams. Appreciate you. Take care.